Hello and welcome to the Digital Publishing Podcast, Episode 8, The Heartstrings and the Geek Button. This time I'm thrilled to be joined by Michael Johnson, VP of Content at Benetech, to learn his story and all about Benetech's huge contributions to accessible publishing around the world. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on the Digital Publishing Podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate.
It's a pleasure to have you. I think it's quite early for you over there, isn't it? You're in.
Oh, it's nothing awful. It's 09:37.
So that's not bad at all. Yeah, yes. For listeners, can you tell them where you are right now?
So I am in the beautiful state of Wisconsin, down by the southern border, about 8 kilometers outside of a village of 1,700 hardy souls.
Oh, sounds peaceful and lovely from my noisy London suburb.
Indeed.
So for those who aren't already aware of you, and I suspect in our audience that won't be very many people, could you just introduce yourself and your work, please?
Sure. Michael Johnson. I'm the Vice President of Content at Benetech. Benetech is a charity which focuses on making digital content accessible for people with print disabilities.
Brilliant. And we'll come back to talk a lot more about what that means later and about Benetech. But I thought we'd start with your own story, which is rather different. As I understand, you didn't actually start in accessibility at all. Can you tell us how this happened?
No, I didn't start in accessibility, and my start is ages ago, eons, sometimes it feels like. I got started and have been doing the same thing in 1985. And the same thing, Simon, is the blend between technology, publishing, and distribution, whether it be at retail or schools and universities, libraries, things like that. So that subset of those three circles, technology, publishing, and distribution, is what I have been at since 1985. So we are rapidly approaching the anniversary of year 39 coming up here. And all the rest of those times were all on the commercial side of things.
Right.
U.S. government contractor working on huge projects for universities and federal institutions, all doing coding on the mainframe. Then I moved to a public library company. And from there, I went to another huge book distribution company. Then I ran my own consultancy for about 10 years. And Benetech were actually a client of mine. They were asking me, to explain to them that odd little subset of things that I'd been inhabiting for many years, to help them understand it. And one thing leads to another, as things do. And after consulting with them for many months, trying very hard not to come and work here, I was overwhelmed on two fronts. First, the strong tug at the heartstrings. And by that, I mean the longer I worked with Benetech as a consultant and met a number of the staff, many of whom are blind or have extremely low vision or other reading challenges, and especially started hearing the member stories, literally lives that Benetech had changed through the BookShare program, which I hope we can explore a bit later.
Absolutely.
So big tugs on the heartstrings, which is a bit unfair, really, to be honest, because, I was just this merciless capitalist out there earning a wage as a consultant. And then they hit me right in the geek button because they were explaining to me about the Braille reading devices, electronic Braille reading devices, and the fact that Benetech can make its entire collection in BookShare available through BRF, the format, so that anyone who can read Braille could have, and was qualified to be a member, could have access to that content. So a strong tug on the heartstrings and a heavy push with a mallet, I think, on the geek button. And there you have it. So 5.5 years later, I'm here. I'm the vice president in charge of our ever-expanding collection of content, as well as a variety of services to help others in the marketplace understand and participate in creating more accessible content.
Fantastic. And how did you actually climb up inside the company? What kind of roles did you have before this one?
It was purely by a series of accidents and obviously critically bad personnel decisions to elevate me to this role. No, I'm teasing, of course. Um, so when I first came, Benetech had a number of different programs. There was a global literacy program. There was a program to help aid stations, soup kitchen type things, as well as a program around a safe storage for videos that were documenting atrocities and things such as that. And so I was a small piece of the literacy program, primarily sort of a permanent extension of the work I was doing, speaking with the publishing community and the ebook vendor creation community, explaining to them what Benetech does, encouraging publishers to, one, donate their content to BookShare, and two, participate in our various programs. So it's basically an in-house consultant, if you were, working in those same circles. And then through the course of those years, Benetech chose to focus entirely on education equity through making literacy available to people with print disabilities.
Right. So I was wondering that with Benetech, that shift that Benetech took in to sort of focus on publishing and on literacy. Can you roughly date that shift for us?
So I would say the beginning of the shift, as it were, was somewhere around 2021.
Right.
And then the final decision to shed the other pieces and to reorganize the company as it is today and to put me in the role of the vice president of content happened almost 2 years ago, just about now. We had a new chief executive officer join us, a brilliant man. His name is Ian Kishore. Very well versed in equity issues around reading and education around the world. And he saw the opportunity as we were reorganizing anyway, dropping these other programs, to really focus in solely on literacy and education equity. So through all of that, he chose to offer me this role based on my experience inside of Benetech for those first few years, but more broadly, all those other decades of experience.
Right. So I think we'll talk about BookShare now, because I think so many of our listeners will be aware of it in one way or another. But for those who have not come across it before, could you just give us a kind of top level view of what is BookShare and why does it exist in sort of different ways in different places?
Right. So BookShare is two separate things inextricably linked. The first is the BookShare collection itself. So this currently sits about 1.3 million titles, gathered primarily through donations, 900 publishers representing almost 2,000 imprints around the globe who donate their content to Benetech, and we make it available via BookShare. So that's the first piece. That's the collection piece. And without it, the software is meaningless. But the data by itself can't do anything just sitting there, making Jeff Bezos richer, flashing lights on and off on Amazon Web Services servers. Of course, we need the technology stack to help us.
Right.
So BookShare is also that technology stack, the ingestion and indexing of all those files, the discovery of all those titles, and the user interface, whether they're downloading to use their own reading apparatus, whether they're using our web reader or our offline reader.
Right. So the main model is this huge repository of books, and people can download from that using whatever people can download from there in whatever format they need. What formats do you currently output in?
Right. So EPUB is our primary format because it is, of all the various formats available in the digital world, the most accessible.
Here.
We also have DAISY available. We have an accessible Word file available. And we have digital Braille, as I said, with my Geek button. Yep. And we also have our own sort of internal format that works in our web-based reader or in the offline reader. Right. There's another piece to the BookShare technology, which is we have several partners around the world who use BookShare as their core stack for their own collections. Right. For instance, Simon, in your part of the world, RNIB run a BookShare stack. So that's one. Vision Ireland, the CELA in Canada, as well as Vision Australia, they're all using the BookShare technology to empower their collections and serve their members.
So their collections are separate from the one that you mentioned before, the 1.3 million titles.
Right. They have the opportunity to have their own unique collections,
Right.
or to tap in books which have been made available from the BookShare Global Collection via publisher's permission. We are quite stringent on honoring, not just because it's the appropriate thing to do from a moral and ethical and legal standpoint, but also because we want to encourage our publishers to continue donating and to donate more if possible. So if the publisher says, right, these books are available English only, North America only, Europe only, UK only, whatever it happens to be, we honor that massive matrix.
So
the majority of our publishers donate either worldwide or country-specific plus Marrakesh, because we support the Marrakesh Treaty.
Right. And you use the word donate. Just to be clear, readers are accessing these titles for free. What are the sort of qualifiers that allow people to access titles in different places?
Right. So first, a bit of a clarification there. Many members around the world do access for free. There are certain categories for a variety of reasons, and I don't want to bore you or your listeners for what those reasons are, but there are certain reasons that some members in some parts of the world have to pay a modest annual fee.
Right.
But the supermajority of our users do get access for free. The users must be certified with a print disability. The certifier could be a medical doctor, a government institution, a teaching specialist, a reading specialist. There are a variety of people who are professionals who can make a professional assessment. An eye doctor, as an example, could certainly say, yes, this person has extremely low vision or is blind or what have you. So one cannot self-certify. One cannot just jump in and become a member. Now, we do have a small number of titles from the public domain that anyone could come to BookShare and download. They'd still have to sign up to be a member, but they don't need any qualifications to get to those titles. Now, they could get those titles in a wide variety of places. We just have included them as a service for our members.
Right.
But to get to the donated publisher titles, you must be certified with a print disability.
Right. But you don't need to be in education or in any particular institution. You just have to be certified by somebody who's able to do that.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
And depending on what your personal situation is and where you are geographically, that's where the fee goes from 0 to a modest number, depending on a variety of factors, as I said. But yes, you need to be certified, but you don't need to be, in second form or at uni or anything like that. No.
Right.
Most of our users are, but it's not a requirement.
Right. So that's what gets the people into BookShare. What gets the books in? What formats are actually donated from publishers by and large, and what would you rather they delivered?
Right. So we're quite fortunate because almost every single one of those 900 publishers are donating an EPUB. That is the lingua franca, if I may, of the accessible digital content world. We do have a few publishers a very, very small number, who are still trying to figure out proper EPUB distribution. Either they can't do it properly internally, or whoever creates their ebook files, or whoever does their super distribution, they can't figure it out. So we work with those very small number. It's usually a quick process to get them from whatever it is they're doing from the 20th century into what they should be doing now.
Right.
And that's that. We are grateful for all the donations. So if the publisher says, I'd love to donate, but I have this, super. We will meet them where they are and help them along their journey.
Right. And what happens if someone donates, say, a PDF? How are you still able to offer all these accessible formats when some of the ingredients are then missing?
Right. So PDF is a particular challenge because it's simply not possible to make a PDF accessible in any full and meaningful way. So what we have to do is we have to take those donated PDFs, pay a conversion vendor to extract out the bits and pieces into a Word file, and then run a Word to EPUB conversion or something like that. I can't hand a PDF to somebody who has a print disability and expect them to function, because of all the reasons. I mean, the simplest thing there, Simon, is PDF was designed to do a particular thing, and Adobe have done a fantastic job with that thing, and that thing is to take a picture of a page. And I don't want to shock you or your listeners, but blind people can't see pictures. So the picture of a page is not useful from an accessibility standpoint. There are people who are
Even with
doing a lot
selectable
of very
text.
hard. Right. And we're talking about changing fonts. And when I say changing fonts, I don't mean making the font bigger. I mean, as a reader with this particular challenge that I have as a reader, I need to use this particular font. And, you can't do those sort of things. So literally changing the font and the page navigator, there are a number of things. Now, there's a lot of work going on both at Adobe and in surrounding ecosystem around Adobe to make the PDFs more accessible. And we are ever hopeful that Adobe will join basically the rest of the publishing world and allow output in a properly formatted EPUB file. There are strides being made. I don't wish to cast Adobe in a dark light. In fact, I gave them credit. They set out to do a thing, and they did an excellent job doing that thing, which is to create a picture of the page. Work is underway, right? And we are all hopeful that we can get to the point where, just as a matter of course, you finish your layout in Adobe, you push a few buttons, and out comes a properly formatted, accessible EPUB file.
Right. Now,
we are hopeful.
We're hopeful. Many of the listeners will have heard me over the years. I've talked many times in webinars and seminars and on here about why EPUB is the keystone format for all accessible formats. Why it's not just about ebooks in the narrow sense, but about the founding piece to make everything else. I'd love to just hear this in your words. Why is EPUB such a good starting spot for accessible formats?
Right. So this is another one of these old man stories, Simon. There was a bunch of madmen, of which I was one, back in 1999 and 2000 in the main, basically, gallery theater at McGraw-Hill in Manhattan, who were running about trying to solve this problem. More and more digital things was happening. The Adobe Content Server was out. My team and I were busy building the first library ebook platform that was commercially viable, and we were all trying to understand how can we normalize this, because we had other metadata standards that were normalized, NISO and ISO standards and things like that, the MARC record format in libraries. And so we were all used to standards, right? But there wasn't a standard for this new thing. So it was the Open eBook Forum, and we started banging away trying to figure it out. And years go by, and tears are shed, and work happens, and late nights and other nefarious activities go on during all those meetings. And we end up with a designed from scratch. The whole point of this is easy transition, creation, digestion, and consumption of a single unified global digital format. And so when that is your goal, here's the thing we are setting out to do: not to protect this, not to extend that, not to favor this type of work or that type of reader or that type of commerce platform. No, the goal is we need a format that everybody can use to enable the creation, distribution, purchase, discovery, and consumption of a digital format. And because of that, and I'm not taking credit for inventing the format or things like that, but I'm just saying that the goal from that mob, it was a well-behaved mob, but a mob nevertheless, the goal of that mob was to do such a thing.
Right.
So we basically cast aside everything else other than how do we satisfy this goal. So I have no pride of ownership or authorship, as I am not the owner or the author. But I was in the room early on, as were many, many others who played much, much bigger part than me, occasionally chirping in saying, and what about libraries or something like that, as real technical geniuses throughout the ecosystem built this format with this intent. So I have a great deal of confidence that it's the best format to accomplish these things because it is its sole goal to accomplish these things. Add into that, we already have this format that people are moving towards using that was designed for this purpose. We should also add in accessibility features. So I'm sorry to say accessibility was not a key goal in the beginning. However, the fact that we created this easy to understand, create, manipulate, distribute, and consume format, when the accessibility community came to us and said, what about us? We're like, okay, well, tell us what you need. What can we do? And so we started doing it. And EPUB format now, which is in the hands, much more capable hands, certainly than mine or even that MOB I mentioned earlier, of the W3C, globally maintained with all the rights and rigor of a global standard. So there you go. Very long answer, but that's what happened.
No, I mean, that's a great answer. And I think you managed to answer it without talking about the code too much, which I think is possibly where we lose some people. But of course, the kind of richness, the sort of semantic elements to the code in an EPUB, this must make all of the difference for someone like Benetech who wants to then transform that into other formats, right, where these things are necessary for navigation and what have you.
Exactly. And so with that as our starting point, we are able to create those other formats I told you, either immediately or on demand based on which format it is and what the member situation is, which we could not do. I mean, you can't send me a Word file and have me magically create digital Braille or something like that. So that would be a journey, and the member would have to wait and fail their A levels or whatever, So we don't want that to happen.
Right, especially in a learning context where that wait could put somebody behind a class, right? Where delays are fundamental, and in fact, if it's too long, then it was completely missed.
Exactly, and so here again, EPUB comes in as our core technology from which we can sprout whatever needs to be sprouted. And we're also prepared because a number of Benetech staff, consultants, etc., sit on a number of these working groups and active committees and are authors or co-authors or contributors to these various standards. So as other things come up from the base of the EPUB, we can just incorporate whatever the new things are.
Right. So if a publisher hears this and says, brilliant, there's my answer to legislation right there. We'll just supply all of our content to BookShare. We don't need an accessibility program as such. We've just got to send things off there. Could you attack that straw man a little for me? Just explain why it's actually not a whole answer to accessibility in and of itself.
Right. So there are a number of different issues there. The first is, yes, we would love to have every publisher in the world donate every book to us. That is my, if we follow Zeno's paradox, the arrow fired at a target never actually hits its center, but grows always half closer. So that's my goal, is to get all the books. Or as my boss likes to say, every book from every publisher. Thanks. That only addresses the accessibility issue partially, meaning just because you send a nice EPUB file, even if it's very well formatted, the accessibility features and content in that file might not be there. So just because it's a well-formatted EPUB file doesn't mean you have perfect page navigation. Doesn't mean you've done your language shifts properly, because the checker doesn't know where the language shifts are. The checker's just looking at bits and bytes and say all the bits and bytes in the proper order. You might have images, but you might not have done a proper job with alt text images. Or long descriptions. You might not have appropriately broken down your formulae into MathML or something like that. So there's a lot to do. So first, yes, please donate your files. In case any publishers are listening, yes, please donate your files. Michael J at benetech.org. Drop me an email. We'll get it all sorted. But that's only a small piece. So a properly formatted EPUB is the beginning of the accessibility journey, not the end. That's the first sort of defining or restricting factor. The other one is while it's a larger population than most people would think, it's still a select population who could have access to those. So you would not be able to put those books on offer through Amazon.uk or something like that when the legislation comes, because the books you are selling are still not fully accessible. Giving them to us helps. It helps us. It's a good charitable thing to do. It solves a lot of problems for a lot of users, but it doesn't solve the EU legislation problem. Or recently in the United States, we've had a rule from the Attorney General, very similar in language. There are rules in certain Canadian provinces, and more things are in the offing. I'm quite confident of that. So the first piece, yes, thank you, please donate. You have taken a major step. If you're donating properly formatted EPUB files, you're taking a major step, because we will do what we can from a technology standpoint, which is better than the raw file, but still limited. But you don't have an accessible file just because you gave it to us.
Right.
We don't have the resources to take whatever it is you hand us and make it a fully accessible file, which is why we have the other, if we have time we can talk about it, it's why we have the other suite of services to help the
You
publishing
saw where
community.
I was going with this.
Oh, no, I didn't, but okay.
Yeah. So I was going to say, given that it is not the whole answer to accessibility, what else does Benetech offer that helps publishers and content creators to create accessible files that are in a better place for BookShare to go and transform?
Right. So we have a service program called Global Certified Accessible, GCA, because one does love an acronym. So that is it follows the old saw of give a person a fish, you feed them for a day, teach a person to fish, you feed them for a lifetime, right? So we work with the publishers and on the focus of born accessible. So what we're saying here is before you would take that EPUB and send it out into regular sales and distribution, whether you're selling to Oxford or whether you're selling on an online service like Amazon.com, whatever it happens to be, right? So at that point of sales and distribution, send us that file. We're going to tear it apart. We're going to apply 3 different sets of standards. The first are the EPUB Accessibility Standards 1.1. The second are the WCAG, whatever the most current WCAG standards are at the time, 2.2 AA as an example. Those are, you don't need any advice from me. Those are publicly available, easily followed. If you have a person with any technical skill at all, read the format, follow it, Bob's your uncle, right? We have an internal thing, which we don't share, not because we're being coy, but we don't share it because it wouldn't make any sense, because it's everything that we've encountered in 20 plus years and almost 31 million downloads. So to hand anybody that, their heads would explode and it would just not, it would be non-functional, right?
Right.
It would say, how do I get from Piccadilly Square to Leicester Square? And I give you an atlas of the entire world. I mean, it's just not useful, right?
Right.
Or perhaps a map of the multiverse, right? It just simply isn't useful. So on the first two, which are, again, globally, openly published standards, you need to meet the standards full on, right? So you need 100% pass on your EPUB formatting, and you need 100% pass on your WCAG standards. On the Benetech, what we call Born Accessible standards, it's an 80% pass, because these are things that we know in practical use, 20 odd years, 31 million downloads, 1.3 million titles. These are the things that come up, which are either interpretations of the standards or things the standards don't cover. So If you get 80% out of 100, then that's a strong passing grade. And the other 20%, we offer you guidance. You don't have to do this. We encourage you to do this, things like that. So 100% full pass on the other two, because again, public standards, everybody should already be doing them. It's 1 August 2024 at this time. The standards are out there. Everybody should already be doing them. But if you're not doing them now, just go and have a look-see, have whoever's creating your ebooks, Nigel the intern or an outsourcing vendor, whoever's doing it, right? Follow the standards, the end. If you don't follow the standards, you don't pass, the end. Ours are guidance. We need you to get at least an 80% mark, because if you haven't done that, that means you followed the letter of the law, but in practice, your books are not going to be useful. So Those are the 3 bits, right? You send us the first file, you're going to fail. And whatever publishers are listening, I'll just apologize ahead of time and let you know, perhaps relieve a burden. We've been doing this for 6 years. We had 1 book from one publisher pass on the first go, and the second book from the same publisher did not pass. So passing straight through with all 3 is not a thing that happens. Hasn't happened yet, right? So we're going to tear the file apart. We're going to give you a report. We're going to say, these are the things you did wrong. But it's not like when I was a lad in Catholic school where they just put an X on the paper and sent you back to your desk, right? This is what you did wrong. Chapter and verse, here's why it's wrong. Here's what you should have done. And we may even give you some coding snippets to say, approach it this way, right? Do your ARIA thing here, or, this, whatever it happens to be. Then you take that back, you run the book, you don't get out your little digital chisel and fix the one we gave you. You go back, make the process changes in however it is you create your EPUBs or whoever creates them for you, reprocess the book informed by the guidance we gave you, send us the book back. And we stay in this if loop. There I go, be a computer guy again. We stay in this if loop until that book passes. And then we say, please send us a second book. The expectation, and this expectation has proved to be true, the second book is better. It usually doesn't pass on the first go, but it's better because your workflow has been informed by the first book. So the second book has a cycle as well, usually a smaller number of turns through the cycle. The third book might have one or two. The reason the third book might still have one or two is because perhaps this is a subject area that we haven't discovered before from your books. You've been primarily sending us books in maths, and now you sent us a book in geology or something, and so we didn't encounter those things. We can't guess what you're going to do in your next book. So we can't say, be careful about this mistake you might make. You send us a book, we process that book. So after 3 books are through, if we have confidence that those 3 books have taught the lesson, you get certified. If either one of the parties are a little concerned, maybe I haven't learned it as well as I should, go ahead and send us a 4th book. That's fine.
Right.
3 is the requirement. You can send 4, maybe even 5 if need be for whatever your reasons. Then you're through. You're GCA certified for a year. You get all kinds of fabulous prizes, like you get our permission to put that the book is certified and that Benetech is the certifier. There's 2 separate metadata pieces that go in your files. It should go in your Onyx feed, and it should go in your EPUB file, or both. That's fine. And then all the others in the ecosystem will know that. They'll know the book has been certified, at what level, by whom. There is actually a sticker. Well, it's not a sticker, but there's a logo which people are using, in their booths or in their marketing literature. Hey, we're certified. We imagine, although, Simon, this is in no way legal advice or counsel, we imagine this would be a risk mitigation for anyone who wants to sell books in, what are we now, 380 days away or whatever when the EAA kicks in, right? This is a risk mitigation effort. If someone is called to the dock in Dublin and they can say, but wait, we have a Benetech certification. We have at least demonstrated awareness and some level of competence.
Right.
If we've done something wrong, we apologize, but please don't throw us in the chokey because, here's our, shiny gold sticker. Again, not legal advice. So there's also a quarterly bulletin that comes out. And during the quarterly bulletin, we say, these changes are afoot in the standards community. Right?
Yeah.
These changes have happened, and starting on date X in the future, when you get your recertification, you have to follow those rules. So brilliant for how well you did in 2024, but understand, in March of 2026 or whatever, this is going to be happening. So please adjust your workflow. Let us know if you have any questions. And we also do a little bit of birds of a feather, if you will, meaning as we process more and more files from more and more places, from more and more countries, we say, hey, in that third Benetech category where we said perhaps you should lean starboard 12 degrees, we've adjusted that. Maybe 8 degrees starboard is better. So those are the ones where we have flexibility, and this is the opportunity for whoever the creator is to do the best possible job. First 2 do the global standards. Third one are the Benetech specific details. So we offer that as part of the process. The recertification happens annually, not from when you first apply, but when you get certified. And we recertify for 3 very simple reasons. People and processes change. Nigel, the intern, who I so lovingly referenced earlier, went on and got a proper job, and now we have somebody else. Or we've switched outsourcing vendors, or whatever has happened, right? So something on the side of the creator of the content has changed. This happens all the time. Number 2, I promise this one, the rules change. These are WCAG living, breathing standards, so they change. Not regularly as in on a schedule, but regularly in the sense of it's not an idle committee. This is not a fixed forever standard. It's not, this is how much a kilo weighs. It's, it's evolving. So people and processes change, the rules change, and as I mentioned earlier through the bulletins, our guidance changes. So in the annual recertification, we are assuming faith-based that you've been behaving yourself and you've done the things that you demonstrated you knew how to do all along. So we just ask for 1 file. And that file usually passes on the first go. Occasionally there's a little quirky thing that we didn't see in your initial certification that we say, oh no, this bit here, you need to turn the knobs there a little bit. And that works out fine. If that file is in rough shape, well, then we're going to do a much larger case. We haven't had that happen. And so it hasn't been 6 years we've been recertifying. 6 years we've been running the process. So I guess it's been 4.5 years, depending on when somebody passed, they've been doing recertifications. We haven't had anybody come through recertification who couldn't get recertified. We have had a couple that needed more than 1 file, but nobody who couldn't pass.
Right. And you talked about the certification going in the book or in the Onyx file for a book. You're talking there about the one that was checked, right? Not every book that publisher goes on to produce in that year of certification?
No, actually, Simon, it is. Once the workflow is certified, the publisher has demonstrated to us this is how we create accessible EPUBs.
Right.
Then whatever that create flow is, we are, again, on faith.
Yeah.
Saying that everything that's happened. Now, occasionally, and this just happened about 6 weeks ago, occasionally something odd happens. One of our trading partners, because we have regular relations with everybody who's selling ebooks. Everybody. I'm not going to name their names because some of them I'm not allowed to, but you know who they are. So everybody who's selling ebooks anywhere to anybody, we have relations with all of these people because they come to us for guidance, and they also help us when we're talking to publishers because that's their job. Selling books from publishers, distributing books from publishers, putting them in library collections, whatever it is they do. So we have very strong relationships basically with the entire distribution ecosystem. And this just happened, as I said, about 6 weeks ago. One of our partners came to us and said, okay, I have a GCA certified stamp in a book, but the book didn't pass Ace by Daisy. What's going on? Okay. So there were two different books. One was a case of there was a mistiming. They were applying the ACE rules against a book that had been published previously under a different set of rules because, as we've discussed, the rules change. So, right, okay, got it. We've checked. Fine. That was all fine. The other one was a mistake. Somebody who hadn't been certified had used a certain conversion house and they didn't turn off their certifier machine, and some books got misstamped. So It's not as if I'm policing this or I'm coming after anybody. But because the entire distribution community has a working relationship with us, we find these things out and we go back to the publisher and say, what's happening here? The one, we said, why is there GCA metadata in your book? You're not in the GCA program, right? Sorry. Okay, we've checked. Our creation vendor did that. They've resolved it. We're going to reissue the books without the stamp. Fine.
Right. So it shows that this is a mark of confidence. It's a way of displaying intent, but it is not Benetech guaranteeing every book showing that must be entirely accessible.
Right. It would be impossible, literally impossible for us to we can only process, just from a machine standpoint, not make fully accessible, the 10,000 plus titles that come in a month on the donation side. To approach the 1.4 million new books that get published every year, one at a time, would be, it's an impossible task.
Right.
So we don't even attempt. We don't even attempt to do it. But we have these various things. Policing's too strong a word, but it's also an easy, simple word to convey the point. We have these various mechanisms where the entire distribution community, who's also checking this metadata and running their own checks before they load into a library collection or load into a retail site, and they just tell us. And we just get it sorted. We haven't had there's been no blowback from the publishing community or things like that. Right. Many of the GCA publishers also donate to BookShare, which is brilliant because they can sell their books out on the open market, fully accessible with the GCA metadata in them. And I'll give you a particular example if we have time later. But they're also donating so that our members know if I'm looking for a book on Sir Isaac Newton, there'll be a point where they'll be able to say, I want a book on Sir Isaac Newton, and I only want GCA certified books. So in our service, they'll be able to, they can't do it today, but they'll be able to do that so they know every response to their query will be a fully certified book.
Right. So you talked in there a lot about collaborating with sort of close relationship with retailers. I'm interested kind of in the broad, how does Benetech collaborate with other organizations? What's the approach been to that over the years and kind of joint initiatives? Right.
The majority of them are collegial in nature. Let's do a webinar together. Let's be on a panel together. Perhaps we'll make some publisher calls together and explain these reasons and those reasons. We are in the process now of building an approval process for the technology that publishers use.
Brilliant.
Actually, that process has been released. It's called the Benetech Approved Publishing Tool. So, again, what are some good examples? So, Bookalope, as an example, a lot of small publishers use Bookalope. Yeah. Atomic from Easy Press there in the UK. And there's a whole host of others, different tools and platforms that publishers use. So those are commercial relationships because we do charge for all these services, Simon. We're a charity, but it's a cost recovery. But I don't want anybody to get confused. That part's not free.
There's a lot of cost to recover, right?
Right. We need cited technology experts who have a deep understanding of accessibility and accessibility metadata to do the sorting out. So it's not, there's no escape from the cost. And like I said, it's a cost recovery service.
Right.
We also have this new one, which we just launched at the London Book Fair, where we're looking at the tools that publishers are using. And so there are commercial relationships as well. So a few examples, right? And these people, I've been on panels with them. There's no secret that we have these various relationships. So VitalSource. VitalSource is a great example for a number of reasons. First, probably the world's largest ebook seller in the university marketplace. Certainly North America's largest, absolutely. Maybe the world's largest, I don't know. I don't have a place to look up those statistics. So VitalSource, very, very active for a long time on accessibility. And they have actually built a bookstore for only books that are GCA certified. So there's 15,000 odd books in a very particular bookstore that anybody in the world, you don't need any qualifications, anybody in the world can go to and get these beautiful books that are GCA certified. So that's one example of a collaboration. It's that, well, I'm not the vendor. They're the merchant. We're not the merchants.
Yeah.
But as they interrogate the millions of files a year they get, they go through and they look at those EPUB files like, oh, look at that. That one's got GCA metadata in it. That's approved. We're going to hive that off. We're going to put it in this university bookshop and that university bookshop and the global VitalSource store. We're going to put it all the places we put things. But those are additionally going to be put in this bookstore, which VitalSource built for free for us. The books aren't free. I want to be clear there. But they built it for free for the GCA program. And again, they're the merchant. But it only has GCA certified books.
Self-filtering.
Right. So all you need to do is go and say, I'm reading this chemistry course. This is the book I need. And if it's in that bookstore, you know. And the interesting thing about retail and what we're finding out is, as one would imagine, a GCA book is just a better book. It's a better book for all the readers. It's not just a better book for someone who has dyslexia or someone who has low vision or blindness. It's a better book for everybody. Because, going back to the EPUB, all kinds of things become magically and automatically available with a properly formatted, fully accessible EPUB.
Anything spring to mind?
Text-to-speech is the easiest one, right? In-page navigation is much cleaner because when I say go to page 37, there's a lot of intelligence around that link on going to page 37, and I can alert you, you're going to go to page 37, I'm not going to bring you back. So do your own breadcrumbing to make sure you can come back here and things like that.
Right.
Language shifts is a big deal at uni. It's not so much in secondary and primary school, but at uni, language shifts are a big deal.
Footnotes?
Footnotes, endnotes, glossaries, indices, all of those things. Yeah. Much easier to navigate those. Print page fidelity is a critical thing for accessibility. So if the professor says read from page 80 to page 100 before we meet next time for next lecture, page 80 and page 100 in a digital copy of the print book is very different. Yep. This is not going to help the listeners, but I'm holding up my Android. Page 80 on my Android of that same book you're reading, Simon, on your laptop is a very different page 80 because of refactoring. Yep. This should be obvious to everyone. But so when the professor says, the lecturer says, read from page 80 to page 100, the lecturer is not filtering or giving individual advice based on your reading device. The lecturer is talking about print page 80 to print page 100, so print page navigation. And these are the simple things. Look, Simon, all this ties back to, so I do a lot of introductory speaking and I'm lecturing in September at the University of Pretoria. A lot of different things that people ask me to talk about to help kind of raise the bar on accessibility, just the general understanding. Forget about accomplishing anything, just helping people understand. And the simple thing I give there are a series of examples. These are very true in the United States. They may be true in the UK or elsewhere, but I live in the United States, so I'm going to give you US-based examples of things that are mandated through federal law, which for a particular audience that end up helping everybody. And this usually is accompanied by a slide that says, well, you know what, I'll skip the slide. So I'll just tell you what they are, right? So in the United States, via the American with Disabilities Act, you have to have curb cuts. And you have to have ramps either instead of or in addition to stairs. This is federal law, been law for a long time, and that was done for people with mobility challenges. But as a guy who used to travel 100 days a year, nobody loves curb cuts and ramps more than I do pulling a carry-on rollerboard for 200 or 300 flights a year. That's a beautiful thing that I can roll and I don't have to carry upstairs, right? So this, again, federally mandated in the United States, American with Disabilities Act, you must have curb cuts and ramps in addition to or instead of stairs. They didn't build it for Michael Johnson. They built it for people with mobility issues. Super.
Yep.
Michael Johnson
Yep.
benefits every time he travels.
Yep. The other thing that comes to mind for me is closed captions and audio descriptions,
Right.
used by
Exactly.
lots and lots of people.
That's the next one. That is the next one. All right, so I'll give you the slide now. You've goaded me into it. The slide has 3 simple bullets on it, and it says beers, babies, and echoes. That's what the slide says, and that's just a pacing mechanism for me. So beers, which usually comes first, but I did it second in this example, is just that. You're in a hotel lobby. You're in an airport. You're wherever you are. You're in a barbershop. Wherever it is you are, where you can't hear the sound. And the announcer is telling you that my beloved Washington Freedom just won the cricket championship in Major League Cricket here in the United States. But if you don't have closed captioning, you don't know. You can see there's a cricket background going on there, but you don't know that my beloved Washington Freedom won the championship unless you have closed captioning. So closed captioning is done with people who have hearing challenges. But I benefit, you benefit, anybody who goes anywhere where it's noisy benefits by closed captioning. Federally mandated for a particular user community, benefiting everyone. And the echoes, which basically covers all the voice-assisted technology, same thing. Mandated for people who have an inability to interact in a quote-unquote normal way with technology. They can speak the instructions. So those are the 3 most prevalent examples that everyone has some experience with that were for a certain community that benefit everybody. The exact same is true. A well-organized, formatted, and fully accessible EPUB is just a better EPUB.
Right.
It's better for all of the readers.
Right. And you don't have to predict how it will be better. You're just giving the ingredients for whatever someone needs.
Exactly. And I may never turn on closed captioning on my television at home, but it's there. And if I want to, if my lovely bride's gone to bed and I want to stay up and watch New Zealand rugby at 2 o'clock in the morning here or something like that, I can do that with closed captioning, although I can probably just follow it on the screen. But anyway, the point is, because those things are there, if someone wishes to or needs to use them, they can.
Right.
I knew an old woman who lived on a farm, and her number one, she had all these words of wisdoms, but the one which is applicable here is, I would rather be 40 feet up with a 50-foot ladder than 40 feet up with a 30-foot ladder. So, if you have it there for the need, then you can use it if you need to or wish to. If you don't have it, if you wish to or need to, you can't do it. And that's the core. That's the core of the whole thing. And
you can't always predict what needs will emerge, right? I know there was an article doing the rounds recently about how millennials and Gen Z really love to use closed captioning on Netflix and other kind of video services. Partially, it was proposed partially due to changes in audio recording and audio recording styles, or maybe it's something to do with attention or something else. But for whatever reason, they're increasingly switching that stuff on. And then you also talked about voice, and of course, voice-activated doodads have been trendy for years. I think it's almost beginning to quiet down now. But these things that may have initially been thought of as related to accessibility have sort of become part of cultural technology paradigms quite independently.
Yes, that's absolutely true. So what it comes down to for us, and I'll give you another very regular working example. People say, oh, well, what kind of format does this person need or this kind of person need? Here's the simplest thing. So let's say we have, and now I am simplifying the categorization only because we're pressed for time. So I don't mean to say every dyslexic person has these needs or behaves this way, but a simple example, one which a member has told me about, this person is dyslexic, and if they're reading for study, doesn't have to be at uni. They could just be, wanting to learn more about gardening or woodworking or whatever it is, right? If they're reading for study and comprehension, then they use our reader, but that's not important. Whatever their reader is on a computer device, and have the text highlight across and be read audio. So they can do the best they can optically tracking. The highlighting helps them track, and the audio helps them do some of the decoding. All right.
Right.
However, if it's leisure or pleasure reading, if it's whatever, Sherlock Holmes or whatever it is, then they much prefer the audio format.
Right. Because brains are complicated. Comprehension is complicated, right? People have different needs in different situations.
Exactly. And a lot of people listen while they drive, which I strongly discourage people reading devices while they're driving.
Yeah.
And most of the local constabulary would agree with me. So an audiobook is good there, right? So it's not just, oh, this person is fill in the blank. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they're blind, so they need Braille. Well, I know a lot of blind people who don't read Braille at all.
Right.
They came to blindness more often than not. They came to blindness later in life, and they're like, you know what, I'm just going to do this Daisy audio thing, or I'm going to, whatever. So we don't just out of respect for fellow humans say, oh, a person who has this thing needs this thing. Our responsibility is, as you said, Simon, our responsibility is to create the broadest opportunity for success and enjoyment for our readers.
Right. So as we approach the final section of our podcast today, I just want to ask you a little bit about the future. Obviously, the big conversation right now, particularly with accessibility, is how can AI make up for all the years of neglecting developing these features for a lot of companies. Where do you stand on kind of the role of AI in accessible publishing and how that might develop?
So AI has a modest use. And I feel, as a technologist, in all markets, AI has the same modest use, which is things that can be proved that a human could do anyway, that a machine could do faster. AI is great for that, right? AI would be great, as an example, possibly to do a translation from language A to language B, provided somebody who spoke language B would review said translation and make sure it was proper. So I would never take a book and translate it using AI and say this is the correct answer. I mean, I don't know how many faux pas you've had using Google Translate where you said, where does the bus stop? And you end up buying a pig or something. I mean, that's just, it's madness. So under proper supervision, and I'm not a nihilist or anything like that, but under proper supervision, AI can be a good tool, taking one from 0 to say 38% or 42% or 29% or something of the task to 100. So that's way better than being at 0. But there's nothing, because believe you me, Simon, if there was a thing that I could take all those donated books and magically use AI to make them all fully accessible, we would have already done it. We would be working on doing it. We're not. Benetech is working with AI to try and solve things like maths, because a lot of publishers annoyingly, they put images for math equations. So this is an SVG or something in the middle of a book. Even in the EPUB, it's an SVG. So we're trying to learn, can we detect that that's a mathematics image? Can we correctly put MathML in there and do that? Those kind of things, it's useful. But to write books, no, we're a million years away from AI writing a book of any consequence. Yeah. My standard speech on AI, because I'm asked to talk about this all the time too, is if Oxford, Yale, Harvard, and University of Edinburgh published scholarly papers that said the sky was made of concrete, then AI would tell you the sky was made of concrete, because AI doesn't know anything. It just knows what other people told it. Right. So this is a newsflash for you, Simon. The sky is not made of concrete. So that's not how science works, right? So we believe in AI as an enabler, as a partial solution to help address certain things where we know the answer is right, because you can take the MathML and prove the formula. Right? You know you got the right answer. Yeah. I can't take a picture. So a blind friend of mine told this story, and this may not translate to all the users because I don't know your listener base, but her comment was, AI is very interesting, right? So AI can take a picture and say, image dog, right? But the question is it Lassie or is it Cujo? So image dog is interesting, and it's a step, but it's not the answer, right? Yep. So I do personally, and we do as an organization, believe that AI has a place in moving us forward and helping with some of the heavy lifting so we don't strain our backs. But I don't see it, now this is a personal opinion, I don't see it as a solution. I see it as a helper. Right. Just like Excel won't help you do your taxes properly, but it does help with the maths.
Yeah, it's a tool. So you mentioned image description there. So I take it Benetech is not en masse just letting an AI go and describe images to solve that if it's missing in the source file.
No, because it's not a solution. So no, we're absolutely not doing that. We have a bunch of thoughts on image descriptions.
Yeah.
The first is have the author do it, because the author is the one who decided that image belonged in the book. Yeah. You wouldn't accept a book from an author that had 16 chapters where chapter 11 didn't have any words in it, unless it was a particularly esoteric work. So you tell the author, and many publishing houses in their acquisition contracts with authors, they're just saying you have to supply the author the image descriptions. It's your book, it's your image, it's your idea. Describe it.
Yeah, and the author knows the context, right? They know what that image means in the context of the book, even the chapter it's in, and its particular audience that's reading the book. Whereas, AI probably would know, as you said, dog, or even brown dog.
Yeah, maybe brown dog, but then brown's kind of a murky color. Is it tan? Is it beige? Is it chocolate? Here's an example of why AI is so far away. I don't know how far away from working. So we'll take 3 books, just for conversation, exactly the same picture of the Eiffel Tower, which is now terribly topical because of the Olympics, but I've been telling this story for 2 years. The first book is a cookbook, and it was just an affectation that there's a picture of the Eiffel Tower in a chapter on crepes. Nothing going on there, just somebody thought it was cute. So typically, we would encourage them to just mark that image as decorative because it adds no comprehension or things like that. So the exact same picture taken by you, Simon, or taken by Getty or wherever it came from, exact same picture is in a travel log about going to Paris. And so there's probably something relevant about the Eiffel Tower in the section on Paris. So you would say Eiffel Tower built here, this by Eiffel, blah, blah, don't go on Tuesday, it's too crowded, whatever. That's a bad example, but something germane to this chapter in the travel log about going to Paris. The third book is an engineering book at uni. And the picture of the Eiffel Tower is in there because we're going to discuss the tensile strength of structural steel. So it's exactly the same picture. And AI might be able to say image Eiffel Tower. Maybe. But the Eiffel Tower is a little bit of an odd structure, so I'm not sure it would get it, but it might be able to get it. But could it do those other things? No. Yep. In time, perhaps.
That's a perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael, that's just fantastic. Thank you so much for all the insights and stories today. Hugely appreciated. If any of our listeners want to get in touch, how should they find you?
The simplest thing is just to email me directly, Michael J. as in Johnson, at benetech.org, benetech.org. Happy to help. With my parting words of thanks to you, Simon, I would also like to say Benetech as a charity exists to help people solve this problem. And I beseech you to let me help you.
Michael Johnson, thank you so much for all of your time today. And thank you to everybody for listening. And we will catch you next time on the Digital Publishing Podcast.